As you can see, we have three incredible mothers here tonight. I've gotten to know each of you, and I've been inspired, reassured, impressed with your experiences, and I'm so glad that we get to share what you have to say with others. I have a couple questions, and for the three of you about your experiences, and we have no script here, so aside from my questions, please share with us what you feel is important. One of my questions about starting is to describe your reaction to your child's coming out, and also if any of you have had to deal with your child coming out to you more than once, how you handled it, how you wish you handled it differently, or what you feel proud about in your handling their coming out. So take it away, whoever wants to be brave and answer that or share your own experiences.
I mean, my answer is going to be pretty succinct.
Okay.
Because the first thing that springs to mind was that I fear I was a little underwhelmed when my son came out to me. I think to him, it was kind of a big deal for him to say to me that I'm at the age of 11, that I'm not exactly straight. And it just kind of caught me off guard, and it made me kind of laugh a little bit, because we've been going to camp since he was 7 or 8. And I feel like I kind of belittled his coming out a little bit when I think back to it, in that I kind of said, yeah, babe, like, why do you think we've been going to camp? Like, you know, this is who you are, and it doesn't come as like a huge surprise, but I totally support you. But I just think it's the opposite, Lindsay, of how most people would react, in that I felt like I underreacted and maybe didn't act the way he would have expected me to.
So you brought him and your family to camp when he was 7. And so what were the reasons for going to this camp?
Well, we started attending camp after joining a listserv through the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C., where Ellen knows that we discovered, just Googling, like, my son likes to wear dresses and everything Disney and pink glittery. And like, are there others who have sons like mine? Because I would love for him to know that. And we ended up being vetted and joining a listserv with the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And as we kind of spent time discussing our trials and tribulations on this listserv, we started to think of the idea that that maybe the kids should get together and meet each other but Ellen was earlier than I was, so she should speak more at the beginning of camp than I should.
Well, I think I can't remember what year we joined the listserv. So our daughter, I have 2 daughters, one a cisgender daughter who identifies as heterosexual, and then our younger daughter, Rafi, who at a very early age showed a propensity for what we thought she was, what we called, the listserv helped us with this language, a boy who likes girl stuff. And the listserv was instrumental for me and my husband in terms of just allowing us to realize what one of our friends, and I think she's here in the webinar, Lori Davis, said at one of these meetings. I think what we're helping to acknowledge is gay childhoods, which was such a really important way of understanding. And Lori and a couple of other families, the listserv, they would have a sort of they were based in DC. They would and they would have a summer get together, just a cookout or something. And a couple of families, we were not in the first, said maybe we should go. And so there was born this extraordinary camp. And as Lindsay knows, some of those children who attended camp have continued to identify as boys who like girl things. Some identify as straight, some identify as gay, some are gender queer, and then some are trans. And so it was a really extraordinary thing for us all, I think. But like Lindsay, for our daughter, for Rafi, it's sort of a given that we understood her to be gay. It was when she was in college that we're in Mississippi, and my kids, including Rafi, have great fondness for Mississippi. It's, we were in a college town, and but it was challenging. And I think some of the decisions we made have something to do with that, and also just the difficulty of being two English professors in a really tough job market. So there we were in Mississippi. We didn't have a lot of mobility. Our Rafi went to boarding school, actually. Concord Academy, which was a wonderful experience for her, and then off to college. And it was a couple of years into college, spring of her sophomore year, that she called a family meeting and said, in fact, I'm trans. And so the first coming out wasn't really a coming out. It was sort of just a saying out loud what I think we understood. The thing that, Lindsay sort of addressed that nicked the question of regret a little bit. Our regrets are a little bit more complicated because Rafi had also gone to Camp Aranutic, which is a wonderful camp for gender nonconforming and transgender youth. And she went twice and came back from camp saying, I think I'm a girl. And I think we regret not hearing that more fully and deeply. She's very forgiving of that. She doesn't say, you messed me up. I'm 6'2". She doesn't say that. She says, I wasn't ready. It felt very suggestive. She spends a week with kids and comes home and says, I'm a girl. And that so we consulted lots of people, including some of the folks, the experts involved in the Children's National Medical Center. Anyway, that's a regret that we have, and part of it was, I think, caution. Part of it was, remember, this was 10 or 12 years ago, 12 probably years ago. We didn't have the financial wherewithal to get out to Boston and see Dr. Spack. We couldn't imagine what it was like to live in, what it would be like to transition in Mississippi. So I think some of it was fear and just not quite able to get there. And some of it was prudence, I think. But so I've carried on. So
Thank you. There's so much I'd love to say to what Lindsay said and you said, but I'd also love to hear from you, Danette, about your experiences. So take it away.
Sure. My son, not unlike other trans people, came out as a 14-year-old as a lesbian. And that conversation went well. And I think my first reaction was, well, thank you for telling me. That seems like something important I should know. And then at that time, I shared with him an experience I had with another mom who told me about her son's coming out as gay, and she asked him if they could keep it a secret, and she really regretted so much of that. And so I shared that with my son. We were perceiving him as a female at the time, and he appreciated that. He made one of the biggest compliments to me when he said at the end of our conversation, wow, that really wasn't too hard, or that didn't go too bad, or something like that.
Wow.
Right?
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, a lot of things that happen in the middle between 14 and early 20s, I don't know is really happening. And that is that he's experiencing that's not it. Right. And, while he came out then in his early 20s as trans, and that was a phone conversation. So it was, a little tricky. And so he told us that he was trans. And I remember that there was just a lot of space for a minute in the conversation. And my first response was, we're still here. So I'm glad I said that, because of course that's been true. So I immediately sought support at a center in the small city where I was living. And I just said, are there other parents of trans kids that I can meet with and learn from? And So I think, there are oftentimes multiple coming outs. And so I'll leave it at that for now, because I know you've got other things you want to ask and directions you want to go, Rick. But so we knew we had a lot to learn, but, we were ready to do that.
I think the next obvious question, which wasn't my next question, is you knew to listen to something inside of yourselves to get more information, more support, more education. And if you can just comment on that process, along with your role with your spouses or your family. Did you ask them to join you? Is it something that you did privately? Just curious about that.
Well, I'll start on that one. I have probably done more of the sort of meeting with people. It's more my personality to do that. And I think then, and I, found support. I had 2 or 3 terrific mentors. And then, I was all mom research mode on it. Here we have filmmakers and a career academic. So I'm sure there was a bit of, mom research mode going on there as well. And then I just started reading, family memoirs meant a lot to me, and things in the media and books. And I read as much as I could and just kept meeting wonderful other, parent supporters. And I got really hooked on the advocacy. So, I've been doing a lot of advocacy, and really in the 10 years since my son came out, there's the vocabulary is in the air. People are aware of this. And so, but when I was parenting a child who I would have described as a tomboy, never was there ever a mention by another person, a teacher or primary care provider, or never did I think, I wonder if gender is a question that my child has. Now, I think that's something that parents maybe, depending on where they are and if they have supportive environments, might think, I wonder if, my child was, I would describe as kind of discontented, and I never really knew what that was about, and never did gender ever dawn on me. And so I think that's probably changing in a very short amount of time.
This thinking about what you just said makes me realize that I think some of my not resistance, but I was so angry at how people could not, there was a category called tomboy, right? As you just mentioned. There's no, which is sort of, it has its own freight, but there's no similar category that is sort of accepted and non-pejorative. And it made me angry because I thought it felt so misogynistic to live in a world where basically the idea that a boy would want to wear a skirt, it just suggests some, so I think I was looking in that direction. I was kind of fighting certain battles on that front and feeling angry that people felt the need to sort of categorize, and yet also looking for that's why Boy Who Liked Girl Stuff was just sort of a nice, descriptor. So that's just on that point of sort of looking at gender. I was thinking about the politics of gender, perhaps more than I was thinking about, and the vocabulary and our discomfort especially with boys who, and it's less so obviously, but boys who a truck in, pink sparkles and all of that. The support question for me is just, that is the thing that I would say most of all. And I probably did less of the kind of research maybe when Rafi came out as trans than when I was in this early phase, because and I just, the listserv just could not have been more important to me, and my husband as well. And we have been extraordinarily lucky in navigating this journey pretty seamlessly together, with a few bumps on the road. But the other way in which we're lucky, and this is just a just good fortune is we have support from all family members,
Wonderful.
grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. So that's just lucky.
That is amazing. And I wanted to ask all three of you about that in a moment. One of my questions, Ellen, when we first spoke, was whether the work that you've done in the field of gender helped prepare you in any way. And partially, I think what you answered was that it gave you a place to look for information and get more information. But did it give you an extra sense of awareness or strength?
Yes, and I have to say, I'm sort of humbled to be in, among, these two extraordinary women who are doing incredible advocacy work. I mean, I'm just trucking along, doing my job and loving my kid. Although I have to say, dealing with college kids, helping frame that conversation for staff, for faculty, for students is important. But yes, I did when I was in graduate school, I did a PhD minor in women's studies. This was back in the day, right? So it was women's studies, not gender studies, not gender and sexuality studies. Realizing, so yes, I think I had some paradigms to look at and understand, and really framing a lot of this. And I actually think that a feminist framing of many of these issues has been exceptionally valuable to me, particularly as I have witnessed and watched Rafi begin to navigate femininity in new ways and what it means to be a woman. And she called in tears not long ago because she just doesn't feel good about her. She has had, I'll just say very quickly, she has had top and bottom surgery. And her body has changed. She used to be too thin, very, very thin. She's not heavy, but she's definitely, when you no longer have testicles, you're getting a lot of estrogen. And, so she's sort of feeling uncomfortable about her body, this body that she wants to love. And it felt kind of, crappy because I could say how beautiful she is and all of that stuff, but I was like, part of me just wanted to say, yeah, I've, been there, done that for my whole 59 years, struggled against society's expectations about women and their bodies and watching Rafi, pick the size of her breasts was really interesting, So I do think that my academic experiences gave me some paradigms and frameworks, but none of that prepares you for the emotion.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. Lindsay, I was going to ask you about, I know you found the listserv, but how did you find the space inside of yourself to either know that you needed more or know that you wanted more for yourself? And I'm struck that, your son hadn't come out yet. And yet you knew something was different there. So. Yeah,
well, first of all, Ellen, you do so much more than you realize. Just being an educator and the people that you surround yourself with. I'm sure every word that comes out of your mouth there's some education. You have such a background and you're such an incredibly wise person. And Rafi is just so lucky to have you as a mother. I knew my son was different as soon as he could stand in my shoes, literally, because as soon as he saw them, he's just, the whole closet was just a miracle. And I knew that also he only surrounded himself with girls for playmates. Occasionally he'd have boys over and I would notice that he would kind of test them, kind of test the waters, dip his toe in, see how far he could go. And then when the mothers, would come to pick up their kids, he'd really he'd put on the highest heels he could find and show them how he could walk in them. And I think he wanted to know, how do other parents react to the things that, give me pleasure and make me happy and feel authentic. And I think it was a really tough lesson every time that the boys kind of stood back against the wall and stared at him like, what's happening right now? And the girls, he had a much more passionate interest in girl toys and girl things than the girls themselves had. So we knew there was something very extreme going on there. And I knew that he was getting, coming home from school feeling really sad. I knew he was getting bullied. There were a lot of microaggressions on the playground. People would whisper faggot in his ear when he was in 2nd and 3rd grade. And if he didn't want to report it to a teacher because he didn't want to say those words out loud about him that someone would say to him. He said,
How did you find out?
Words come out of my mouth. He told me, but he didn't want me to tell the principal because he didn't want those words uttered about him again, especially not by an adult. So there was so much shame surrounded by, he said he could tolerate the kids. He didn't want to have to deal with the adults, which kind of speaks volumes.
Wow.
So I think we knew he was unhappy. We asked his pediatrician what she thought. And she said, I think your family needs to find a group that speaks to you and your son and to discover other kids who are like-minded, because he needs to see other people who feel the same way he feels and identifies as he identifies. And the glorious moment of walking into Camp I Am, past the listserv, which was the lifesaver for all of us. I looked forward to it. You checked in like 3 times a day. Like, what happened to the so-and-so at school today? How did they work it out? Here comes Halloween. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Halloween was the worst, especially for, I think, kids who identify more feminine because they're denied. Well, Rafi had a lot of guts. I think down in Mississippi, I remember the listserv conversation where you said Rafi wanted to go as what, Lady Gaga?
She went as Lady Gaga, Batgirl, Marie Antoinette with a wig about 3 feet high. And I just had to tell myself, if she has the courage to do it, I have to have the courage to support it and advocate for it. But boy, that was a tough lesson. Yeah.
It sure was. And we were right there with you. And we all were learning similar lessons, only, maybe in easier communities.
Yeah.
Somewhat. But, it's so hard not to jump around, but finding the listserv and deciding that we all needed to meet each other.
Yeah.
And the day that we entered this hotel room where all the parents were having a meet and greet, and I saw, I can almost not talk about it without crying, but I saw about, I don't know, what were there, like 15 other kids, and they were all wearing, like carrying American Girl dolls in their hands. And Milo just froze and every parent who walked through the door was in tears. We couldn't really contain ourselves. But I think we felt like, well, this is a real turning point for our child. And this is where things start to get, possibly more complicated, more interesting, but also more guided. And you feel like people have your back. We had a community. I knew that. And we knew it would only grow from there. And it did.
So, Lindsay, I'm assuming that when Milo came out to you, you just assumed that Milo knew that he was gay and it was a done deal and it didn't even need to get talked about?
I did, yes. But there was a time also where Dr. Edgardo Menvial, who was the head of child psychiatry, right? At the Children's
I can't remember his title, but
yeah.
All I know is he saved my life, I think. Yeah.
He was very much involved in starting the listserv and this group. But I said, I want to make sure we're doing the right thing by Milo, because I don't know, is he gay? Is he transgender? It was a little early to ask this question, but I kind of wanted to know, how does he feel about his body? And he said, you should see someone who specializes in gender, psychiatry. And he found somebody in New York, and we met with her, and she sat with him for about an hour and a half and just spoke with him and did an evaluation. And in the end, she had a pretty strong feeling that he was comfortable with his body. And she said, I think, he was very unhappy at the time. So we thought he was having some psychological problems. And she said, you know what, I think his personality is the personality he would have been born with, no matter who he is. But she said,
reassuring.
I think he's gay. She really was pretty certain about that. I think
Was that comforting to you or troubling?
that's like one of those funny conversations you have in a group at Camp I Am, like, why can't my son just be gay? It's just like, where else do you hear a bunch of parents say that out loud? That always made us laugh, but that seemed like the easy way out. I don't know that there is any easy way. It's all
correct. There is no easy way out,
it's
as
all
it turns out.
complicated for different reasons. Obviously, you know, your Rafi's been through a terrific amount of pain and medical, interventions that Milo will never go through. But it's not to say that your mental health isn't messed with when you see that so much of your community, your teachers, your superintendent, don't believe that there should be any kind of support, and they look at you like you've got three heads when you want to have a conversation about, can we talk to the administration about the kids not saying that's so gay or you're so gay, because it's really hurting my son, and many other kids, I imagine.
And Lindsay, in the work that I do with families of trans and non-binary children, sometimes the non-binary category could be, could they just choose?
Right.
If they want to be the other, just choose that. But so the non-binary struggle of identifying with both or neither, or, that huge spectrum can be where parents fall there. They, can feel like, I just wish they would land on something.
Yeah.
Give me a category that I understand.
Right. Give me, a label. So the binary is still a very strong force in society, and can be a struggle for kids who are feeling,
right,
who are non-binary, genderqueer.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if we get on board with gay and trans, we have to remember, it is a very broad spectrum. And that seems to be something people have an even harder time getting their minds around.
Yeah,
I think so.
Well, and from the perspective of my child, who's now 24, it really it bothers her when people say, "What pronouns do you use?" Even though it shouldn't. I mean, she should because she's like, "Duh, I'm a woman. I use she, her." Like you go they, them, she, her, and she's like, she, her, duh. Sort of. So for her, there is a binary. There's a position in the binary that she occupies. But interestingly enough, this world that we inhabit now, and I am both grateful for the ways in which, especially this younger generation, is so much more fluent in these. I mean, I was talking to a little girl here. I live in Maine. She, chit-chatting with she's, I don't know, maybe 9. She just moved here. So we're at some function. I was, chatting her up, and she said, "Well, tell me about do you have some friends? I know you just moved here. Did you make some?" Yes, I have friends. I have a friend named Oliver. His name used to be Julie, but now it's Oliver. And it was sort of, there's a real, we're at an inflection point right now where, and surely they're related, but the comfort in the world with especially these younger generations and kids about gender just being a fluid thing and sexuality being fluid, coupled with the hideous, particularly transphobic, really the express effort to eliminate trans people, just as a younger generation is much more comfortable with this notion. It's a hard place, I think.
How do you protect your kids given that this is happening in the world out there? I am, my heart goes to the people who are, trying to get their kids puberty blockers, or kids who are on puberty blockers in, say, Texas, or I'm really, really grateful that I don't have a child in Mississippi right now. She's 24. She lives in New York. There is one final thing, which is getting the birth certificate changed. We have a court date for that. That has to be changed by a judge in Mississippi.
Mississippi has not yet made it illegal to change your birth on your birth certificate. So we are cautiously optimistic, but she has a passport and a driver's license and all that because she lives in New York. And that was very easy to do those things. So we made sure we're working hard on those legal pieces. We have, we don't talk about it too much, but I can't imagine. I know it's very hard to look at the news. I think it's very, very difficult to live in a world she did say at one point, I feel like I live in a world that would prefer that I just don't exist. And that's extremely hard.
Yeah. Danette or Lindsay?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that my son is in his early 30s, so, we live in different states. And so, but I do the advocacy work that I do because I believe that wherever you do it, it's helping advocacy work everywhere, right? So there's a lot to be overwhelmed about, but, I try to, in the work that I do with parents, it's important to be standing up and showing up to fight these battles. But the most important ones are in our own communities. So, start to show up. We keep our kids safer by making the world safer for all children, right? All families. So I think for me, the hard part of this legislation in other states is that, it makes it immediately dangerous for those families in those states. And some of them are fleeing and some of them are just trying to survive. Of course, the court systems are pretty crowded right now because a lot of it is not really happening because it's being, the ACLU is a busy organization right now, HRC and others. But I think the way we keep the world safer is to, in our own backyards, show up and do this advocacy work and make it safe for the kids and young adults and youth where we live.
Yeah. I'm going to switch over to questions. I have a couple of topics that I'm interested in, such as grandparents and kind of tending to the needs of grandparents and language and terms that you've learned that you can share with us. But I also want to get to people's questions. So do you find that mothers in general are more supportive of their kids' gender identity than fathers? And did you face any conflict with your partner?
No, personally, I did not. My husband is incredibly supportive. In fact, he was more on board with kind of nurturing my son's interests before I was. I don't know why, but I was just slower to catch up with like, wow, this is, not the typical boy who wants typical boy things. But I will say there were a lot of kids at camp who would show up and the parents were either going through a divorce over this topic or eventually, probably more coming to camp, having gone into a divorce or separation because there was a disagreement in how to approach their child's identification, identity, gender identity.
Rick, I would say in general, yes. There's a lot of fierce moms out there. And that's the case with other organizations like Moms Demand and other, places where, moms are, showing up and stepping up to fight other battles. But it is changing. More and more, we have more, family members, both parents attending meetings. I do a support group through a suburban Detroit, Michigan foundation called Stand with Trans. And we just started this support group last August, and it's for parents of adult trans and non-binary children, because they tend to go to these support groups and there's a little bit more happening with, the 9 and 13 and 18-year-olds. And so and so there are like 25, 30 people who come to this meeting every month and their children are, 20, 30, 40, 50, and making these declarations for the first time. And they're in that group, as with a group that I do here in Colorado Springs, it's changing. It's mostly moms, but there are more dads coming all the time. And I really, really appreciate that, that more dads are showing up, more parents, let's say. I mean, all of our language is very gendered, but more parents, both parents are showing up. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything, Ellen, about that?
No, I mean, I mentioned earlier that my husband and I have pretty much been on the same page. I do, it gets very gnarly and knotted because, of course, it depends on if we're talking about, where, if we're talking about gay, male, female, trans, it just gets messy. But I do think in general, we have a deeply, I don't think we know we have a deeply misogynistic and patriarchal society, and I think in general that even with highly enlightened individuals, men, that it can just be really ground shaking, I think. But I have not had that experience. But like Lindsay, I've seen it a lot. And particularly with dads who just have a hard time letting go. And
using religion as an excuse.
Yes.
I feel like the religion comes into it a lot. Like,
yes,
I think it's just oftentimes feels like an excuse.
Yeah.
Like,
but and I know we're not dispensing advice. We're just talking about our experiences, but the thing that I remember learning most from the listserv, and that any kind of, groups that I'm in on Facebook, et cetera, is love your child, listen to your child, and love your child. And so at the first sign of that descent, if you can kind of return to that ground, I think it's really, how do we best love this child? How do we keep this child alive? I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but how do we keep this child alive?
and that's not easy.
No.
For everyone, because I think maybe I was naive as a parent, but I did not expect to be thrust into the role as this advocate who has to go into the schools and into the community and teach every family member. And, it's a lot of extra work that you want to do, you right by your child, but you also want to do it the right way. And one of the feelings I had about camp is like, wow, we were kind of pioneers, and the vocabulary, as Danette said, was constantly evolving, and we have to take this vocabulary back to our communities and our families. And then this New York Times piece was coming out, and it's like, people are looking, like, people are looking now, and what are we saying about our kids and who they are and how they identify, and pronoun. I mean, it's a very serious role to find yourself in. Other that, like, as if parenting weren't hard enough. Not everybody's really comfortable approaching their superintendent at school. I know I wasn't, but you also become a fierce advocate, and there's nothing that can stop you, uncomfortable or not. Like, I want my child to be happy and live a safe,
and you're
life.
Here for a reason, based on that. So, as I said, 3 incredible mothers. I'm going to go to the next question. What role did your family and friends play in supporting your child's gender identity? Were there any instances of resistance or lack of understanding? And if so, how did you address them? Would like to go first?
I'll share a little bit there.
Okay.
I don't know how it came to me that the right thing to do was to sort of shrink my world a little bit, but it did.
Really?
That wisdom came to me, and it's one that I continue to advocate that families do. Because parents need to get support in place, and they need to be, get some education in place and be able to talk about this and be, with a trans child, there can be a bit of emotion about it. And sometimes that emotion can maybe communicate that you're not cool with it. So I sort of encourage families to shrink their world a little bit and get support for everyone in place, right? The child, of course, for sure, the parents, and then, have the one or two, who's your first person? Who's your first call? Have your support in place, and don't be in too much of a hurry to shout this out to the world, because we need to be ready, right? We have to be ready for maybe some resistance. So we have to know some of the literature and what we might, how we might, educate our family members and things like that. So my own experience, my person was my sister, and she was the first person to use my son's pronouns. And
Wow.
I beamed when one other person did that, right? So I had my support in place. Eventually we had small families, and because our son was an adult, he basically said, this isn't a secret. Don't tell people, however you want to navigate that, right? But we lived in a small city, and we'd run into his former teachers who were his teachers and his sister's teachers, and they'd say, how are the girls, right? And so there was this time, and that can be exhausting as families kind of, all of that gets so. Of course, I encourage that people do that, but also, especially for our trans and non-binary children, they get to lead the way on that. When does grandma find out? Because that can be a tough place if grandma isn't now the soft landing space that grandma used to be, right? So there has to be some preparation. And then, families really have to sometimes make some hard decisions about who's in and who's out. We don't start by drawing a line in the sand, but ultimately we must advocate for our children. And sometimes we have to make different decisions about how Christmas is going to be celebrated, or, so there's a lot of good literature out there. And of course, PFLAG is fantastic for this great, well-written, easy to read family literature that I'm holding up these booklets all the times at support groups. But I sort of, encourage people to take it slow.
Good.
Good advice.
Yeah. Ellen, Lindsay?
That all makes great sense. And I think we let our daughter tell people in her time. It was actually, because Rafi has been gender nonconforming, and her name didn't change, so we were able to. So she changed her full name, but her nickname remains the same. So her identity had been fluid from the jump, really, and so it wasn't some big giant revelation, but it was still hers to share and tell. I said earlier that we have a ton of support, and we do. But there were times, especially when the grandparents would, watch the kids for a while, and Rafi would want to take her, at this time identifying as male, but, take her gold spangly purse, and her grandma would say, what do you do about the purse? They're like, we let her take the purse because why not? But I think Danette's point is a great one. Where's the, it's ripples, right? And where's the place? And you also have to find the places, I think, where you can mourn a little bit.
Yes.
And just be honest about your fears and some of your sadness and some of your anxiety. I'm anxious every day, in different ways, I think, than I was when I understood Rafi as a gay boy. So, the people with whom you can share some of the hard stuff, and then also the uncomfortable moments when, look, my child has been out for now 4 years. Every once in a while, particularly when I'm irritated with her, I misgender still. She's quite, I don't typically do it in her presence, but I've thought a lot, read a lot about what you should do when you do those things. But I've also had to, we saw a family member we hadn't seen for a long time recently, and the family member's totally supportive, but understandably, on some level, this was the first time she had seen my daughter since my daughter transitioned, and it was very easy for her to use he, him, pro. It was just not, and every time I just corrected, and this was the family member said, I'm so mad at myself. I don't mean to do it. And I said, I know you don't. So just, move on, correct and move on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you want to comment, Lindsay?
Not really. I mean, I have a very nice support system. I can say there were a few friends who suggested to me that I was overreacting when I found the camp. Why can't he just play with the girls, and just let him be and let it just evolve? And the point was, no, I think he needs to see other children who are assigned male at birth who identify as he does. It felt really important for us as a family. We just wanted to see what kind of impact that would have on him. And it's not like he got to camp and he was like, here are my people. For 2 years, he stood back. He was really shy. Rafi's a total extrovert, and Milo, he's a mix. And it wasn't, none of this has been the solution. I mean, he gets all the support in the world, but we've had he's had a lot of problems.
Yes.
And that's the first kick in the face, the real one, when he was older. And I felt like, well, what are these problems we're having? We're having some serious problems, but he's had all the support in the world. I thought that meant that everything would be
Eradicated.
just smooth sailing. But he's also a human being, and no matter how he identifies, it's really hard to be in your 20s. And yeah, I guess we were kind of shocked that everything didn't just kind of roll out perfectly, because he's accepted and supported. That's not even enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just reaffirm what Lindsay's just said, which is, I mean, our kids are our kids. And they're, some of what they experience, I do actually feel quite confident that much of what Rafi, the challenges that Rafi has faced in her lifetime do have to do with her gender identity and the world around her, the world that she inhabits, the body she has inhabited, et cetera. But that's not the only, that's one thing. They're also just people with, complicated, all the baggage we gave them, and some extra, but this is a great point. I am incredibly fortunate, particularly because I, left Mississippi for this new job in Maine. We have incredible insurance. That insurance enabled us to do these gender affirming surgeries very inexpensively. Facial feminization is not covered. That's a Rubicon we haven't really crossed yet, but we have the insurance, we have the support network, we have the paradigms we've got, and still it is tough.
Yeah,
it is tough, and so that's just a fact.
Yeah, that is
beautiful.
A fact.
It is beautiful. And I really do believe that my child was put on this earth to teach me and other people really important things. But it's a very brambly journey, and that's just truth. Thank
you. Appreciate that. And you're an inspiration to people who are out here listening. I'm going to move along. Our amazing assigned female at birth son, Beck, just shared his driver's license with me. It now says M. It's just one letter, but it means so much. And we know it's because of our trans representative, Jerry Cannon, who's a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. So congratulations. That's amazing. Next question. What positive changes have you witnessed in your child's life and overall well-being since they embraced and affirmed their gender identity?
Well, I'd like to start there because I mentioned before that, my child was sort of discontented as a child, and I didn't really know, and he didn't know either. Of course, he told me from his earliest memory, he's always known he was different, that he experienced the world differently, but it was really late teens, early 20s before he found, it's like, am I just a super lesbian or what? I don't know why I can't feel settled, right? So, but since that time, I mean, my Ellen did mention, time to grieve, and I did have some grief, and I look back and there were times when I was negotiating with him. I can now, recognize it now, but my grief was short-lived because here in front of me was this happy person feeling contented and settled and like this is who I am. That did not take long for that to blossom for him. I would have described his trajectory in life at that time as being, he was in and out of college a couple times, the semester and would drop out and move, and a semester and drop out, and being, and immediately after he came out and started on T and had top surgery, he got back into college, finished a degree, is happy and successful in a career. And that wasn't happening before. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so, our family journey has been joyful. Wonderful. There were, we had to learn, we made some mistakes. His sister had some, learning to do, but I value our positive relationship so much. And then this is who he is. And I've made a mental switch. It's really part of deep-seated acceptance is to not just say you support your child, but now to have a totally, to really do the mental switch. Each day when I think about my son for the first time, that's how I think about him, right? I don't think about how he used to present and how we used to think about him. It's a total transformation in how I think about the child, even though all the good things about him are still there. Mm-hmm. And he's about way more than just gender. We have to remember that with trans people. It's not just that they're trans. They're all the other great things and some of the bad habits and whatever things too. But I just saw him blossom. And that had not been the case for a number of years. Wow. The teen years were very tough. So I won't go into a lot of detail there, but it has been a family transformation.
It's amazing. Beautiful.
That's really beautiful. And I have to, and I'm happy for you. And I have to say, we're still in the bushwhacking phase. I think we're, I think, I'm using a lot of wilderness metaphors. I'm not quite sure why, but, I think there is so much joy. But also, I think there was the sense, and maybe this goes back to the point that our kids are a lot more than their gender identity. We're still struggling with some executive functioning issues and some, finishing college issues and, eating healthy, all that kind of stuff. So I think there was a little bit, to be honest, maybe a little bit of a sense of, okay, maybe this will be that transformative moment. The clouds will clear and it will be smooth sailing. And it has, and I'm not suggesting, Danette, that's what you imply, but I think there was a little bit of magical thinking on our part. And the transformation is happening, but it's quite incremental. But I know it's right. I have every, I will also say, that we hit some really quite difficult roadblocks, medical roadblocks that left some trauma and some real difficulty, that is behind, but isn't really fully behind. So, but I know she is who she is. Right. I know she is now able to be herself in the world. I just want it to be a little easier for her sometimes.
Yeah. And I do want to say, Ellen, also real quickly that, it has not been all smooth sailing, and not so much for us, but trans people are, my son has experienced some bad stuff that he's had to go through. And I won't get into a lot of the details, but there have been some dark days and can continue to be, positive mental health continues to be very important. And so anyway, there have been a lot of ups and downs, but I do like to make sure families know that, We can, believing and letting our children, and teach us and finding good support, there is joy. There is joy in this journey. Yeah.
Thank you for your words of inspiration. And I just want to remind people watching to seek out support for yourselves. We have great examples tonight of these incredible mothers who started to give themselves what they needed and then served as role models for the rest of us. So you don't have to be alone. I'm going to read one last question and then we're going to wrap it up. And I think we needed about 2 more hours together. But let me just get to this last question. The world can be so cruel to trans people. How do you all find the strength to comfort and uplift your child, or I would say yourselves as well, when they face discrimination or are scared of being their true selves? And if you don't mind answering that briefly, because we are out of time, but that's a very important question. Who wants to go first?
I feel like Danette's sort of spoken to this some already, maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, again, I would just, the ground of love, like absolute unconditional. I'm here to love you. I can advocate, but I'm not going to be able to fix this, but I can love you, and be here for you. And if you need me, I will be there as soon as I can get on a plane. And acknowledge, I think also acknowledging that there is cruelty out there, but that there is extraordinary love as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just read one more question that just came through and then we're going to finish. I just don't want that person to feel neglected. I'm a mother living in Florida, scared as fuck. I'm reaching out for some guidance regarding my 15-year-old trans daughter's experiences in school. She's been facing challenges such as bullying, misgendering, and a general lack of understanding from her classmate and teachers. I wanted to ask if you've dealt with similar situations with your own children. How did you handle it besides moving, of course? So this is a very loaded, big, important question that deserves a much longer answer. But if you have a couple of quick or a few quick responses, that would be fantastic.
Well, I think families have to have pillars, and the schools are one of those. And so I would do what I could to find the one teacher or the advisor or the coach or there's got to be one person in that school. There's probably more than that, but who can be your anchor, right? So it's almost like a 3-legged stool. We have to have anchors in a school. We have to have an anchor in support for ourselves. We have to get that anchored support in place for our kids, but find that person. And then, of course, it is tiring, but we must advocate for our children. And I'll just mention one resource, Schools in Transition. If you just Google Schools in Transition, it's like a 65-page document that came out in 2015 that was signed by NEA, HRC, GLSEN. I'm lacking a couple of the organizations, but get that document in the hands of that person in the school building so they know what the best practices are. Now, Florida is going to be, a little trickier in terms of some of the things that are happening there. But also, I think the last thing I'll say, and then I'll let one of the other moms speak, know who your equality organization is in your state. I think if you Google trans equality, if you go on there and put in your state, it'll tell you who is your leading LGBTQ organization in your state. It could be HRC, it could be ACLU, it could be Equality Florida. In Colorado, it's One Colorado. Trans students have rights, and they cannot be taken away simply because a piece of legislation says you can't mention LGBTQ in grades K through 3. Those kids still have rights. So I'm a little bit more political about some of it because we have to try to change things. So, I would find a pillar in that school, be sure they know what the best practices are, and know what your state's, your leading LGBTQ equality organization is.
And Danette Blanca also added that there are good PFLAG chapters in Florida as well. So,
And of course, go
Right.
to PFLAG, of
Yeah,
course.
absolutely.
Yes.
Ellen or Lindsay, any quick comments to this very important question?
I mean, Danette has just all the information and the energy behind all of it. So I
Yes.
think that was a really strong answer.
Yes.
I will say we did leave our high school because they were not on board
Mhm.
with the supporting a gay straight alliance. They wanted to create, this is the superintendent said, a rainbow club with children of color, children who struggle with obesity, and LGBT, those who identify, in LGBTQ plus spectrum. And I brought in, some really serious Long Island LGBT representatives, and the superintendent sat there and yawned and looked at his watch the whole time. It was just a message that it was just time to go. This child was not going to be supported there, and he felt that. And they need to be somewhere where they feel supported by the adults.
Mhm.
And that can be hard to find, but it's worth taking the time if there is that place. I can't speak to Florida because that's a really complicated place, but
Right.
I think that did a great job.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, for the example and the inspiration. Ellen, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just
before we
very
wrap up?
quickly. First of all, I think about y'all in Florida, Mississippi, Texas, those,
Yes.
and I too would be scared as fuck. And
Mhm.
so I just want to say, how much I feel for you. I will say, everything that Danette has said, so great. And our children need to see us advocating for them. We did opt, this was before Rafi identified as trans, but she did go to school out of state, and it was an incredible place for her. And I will just also say that many of these schools, if you are open to it or your child is open to it, are going to be, could be very, very beneficial. And also there's really great financial aid. I'm just putting that out there. So on a practical level, I think there are some very good reasons to know that those options are out there as well. So
Thank you. So we need to wrap up tonight. 3 amazing mothers, 3 role models, 3 incredible people: Danette Tritch, Lindsay Morris, Ellen Weinauer. Thank you. This has been incredible. It will eventually be edited and out on video, so we'll all get to watch it and share it with our loved ones. And thank you, everyone, tonight for supporting us here at Gay Sons and Mothers. And our website is gaysonsandmothers.org. Please follow us on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and also visit our merchandise at our store. And thank you so much, all 3 of you and others, for attending. It's been great. Take care.
thank you, Rick.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks again, Lindsay.
Bye, everyone.